It's been a while since I've worked on my dump truck, but I think we're finally going to get back started working on it.
When you gonna build me that coffee table?
Looks like we're building a coffee table. As you can see, we're back in the wood shop today. We're going to be building a coffee table. It's going to be a pretty simple design. A simple design is probably a good thing because I'm really not that good at building furniture. Okay, well really I don't think I've ever built furniture. This is $50 worth of wood. That is ridiculous. Prices are so high right now. I've got some 2x6 by 10s, 2 of them. And then I've got some 2x2 by 8, 6 of them. We are all set up and ready to start cutting some pieces for this coffee table. I don't really have plans for this. I have a picture that Miss B sent me, and then we took some basic measurements in the living room around the couch. I know we want it to be 18 inches high. So we're just gonna kind of figure this out as we go. I've got the 2x6s cut down into 6 equal pieces. Some of these boards are kind of messed up. Like this one's cracked a little bit, and this one's kind of chipped out. But that's okay. I should have about, 7 inches? I should have 7 inches, so I can take a little bit off this side, take a little bit off that side. I don't want to cut the legs of this table until I finish the top, and it never fails. Every time I buy wood and I don't cut it and use it immediately, if I put it in my basement, it starts warping and twisting. It's pretty much useless. So I'm using these zip ties. I had these left over from another project I did, and I've got these all strapped together. Hopefully this is gonna keep these boards straight for a couple of days. We're set up in my basement. Got my pipe clamps, got 2 more right here. We got some tight bond wood glue. Gonna go ahead and run some glue in between all these boards, clamp them together. Before I put the other 2 clamps on here, I'm gonna try to wipe the glue out of these cracks. Now, this is where I normally mess up on a project trying to glue boards together. If you don't get the glue off of here, the stain doesn't look right. It is a gorgeous fall day here, and it's been about a week since we worked on this tabletop. These 2x6s, we got 6 of them. That's 33 inches across. So now I need to square this thing up. Right now these are about 40 and a half, something like that. So I need to take some off of each end. First thing I'm going to do is cut this side off, and we're just going to cut like an inch just to kind of clean up, square up this edge. That looks good. We got a nice straight edge over here. So now I need to pull 33 inches, set up my guide over here. I went ahead and spun the whole tabletop around because I like to cut over here. I got my 33 inches line drawn. So now I got to set up my guide. For my saw, it's 5 inches. So I have to put a mark right there, 5 inches away from my cut line. I have another one over here. And I'll put my guide board on there, use my clamps and clamp it down. And on my saw, it's 5 inches from here. This is the part that rubs along the guide here. So from here to the blade, that's 5 inches. Now it's time to try to sand down this top, get it ready for some stain. I'm gonna use my orbital sander, and I've got some 60 grit and I've got 120. If this board was built better, I would probably just go with 120, but I am an amazing craftsman, you know. So these boards, like this one's higher than that one, and actually this board here is already kind of cupped or flipping up on the end a little bit. So I've got a good bit of material I think I need to take off of this to get it nice and flat. So we're gonna go with 60 first. I think the 60 grit was the right choice for this. I've been working on this about 15 or 20 minutes, It's looking really good. Got all the edges rounded over. All the boards are pretty even now. So we're going to switch over to 120 and keep working on this. Try to get it a little bit smoother because the 60 leaves it a little rough. I am done sanding this coffee table top. It is what it is. I've been working on this thing for over an hour with the 120 grit. Really just trying to take my time. I think it looks pretty good, and it's supposed to kind of have a rustic look to it. It's still got some little spots. I guess if I used a planer, it would have taken some of these rough areas out. And you know, these knots, they're supposed to be that way, right? It's supposed to be kind of a rustic look. Earlier in the video, I showed how I strapped these together, and it's been a week. I can see on the end, they're really trying to twist and warp and everything. So hopefully when I cut these apart, they're not going to be unusable. So before I stain this, I'm going to flip it upside down and go ahead and put the legs together. Well, let's cut these apart and see how they look after a week. And this one's pretty good, still pretty straight. They weren't, oh, that one's kind of twisted. They weren't perfect when I bought them. And that one's curved at the end. But I think that was a pretty good idea, strapping these together. I'm gonna get started working on the base. Gonna start cutting these up. I wish I had a miter saw. It would be faster and easier probably. I'm just gonna have to use my circular saw. This table is going to be 18 inches high, so a lot of these pieces are going to be fairly short, which is a good thing because if the boards are twisted or warped, I'm not going to need really long pieces. I've got all my base pieces cut, and now we're going to nail them together. Going to be using a 16 gauge nail gun. This is what I got. They're 2 inches long, so that should be long enough. So it's pretty much just going to be this square base. And then these pieces, and then there's the rest of them. That'll be here. So I'm going to go ahead and start nailing these together. It's coming together pretty good. So now I'm going to build this other square first, and then I'll set the whole square on top of this. So let's get this out of the way here. Yeah, I think it'll be easier to put that square together and then sit it on top of that and nail it down to the legs. I got my other square built. We got the base sitting back up here. I'm gonna go ahead and nail this other square on here. Can't do it with one hand. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and nail this on. Now, I'm not showing it in the video, but I'm using 3 nails in every joint, so it seems to be pretty secure. I've got my base put together. So now it's time to sand this thing. I've got my orbital sander, 120 grit. I'm gonna go ahead and work on this thing for a while. Clean up the edges, and just, this wood, 2x2s are really rough, so we're gonna smooth them down. I am pretty worn out. I think I've been sanding on this thing for an hour. Now we're going to put some wood filler on here, cover up all the nail holes. This base is going to be painted, so we're going to try to make it pretty smooth. We have run out of daylight. It is 8 o'clock at night and it's dark outside. I'm set up in the basement now. We're going to go ahead and stain the top of this coffee table. We're going to stain it dark walnut. This is what I've used for every project in my house. I use this color because it matches our floor. We're gonna stir this up. I like using these foam brushes when I stain things. Pay like $1 for these, and then just throw them away when you're done. I'll try to do this without spilling it everywhere. I know the lighting's not good down here. Normally I like to use some blue nitrile gloves when I'm staining, but I don't have any right now. They've gotten so expensive over the last year that I don't buy as many as I used to. I'm gonna let this soak in for a little while and then we will wipe it off. It's been probably 5 minutes, so I'm gonna start wiping it off, and I normally just use an old rag or an old shirt. This turned out better than I thought it would. I still see an issue right here where it's lighter. I'm guessing that's glue from when I glued the boards together. I've done some other projects where I glue boards together and they were a lot worse than this. If that really is because of the glue, I don't really understand why I keep having that problem, because I spent probably 15 or 20 minutes sanding the top of this. I even took just some regular sandpaper and just got into these grooves. I would think I would have sanded all the glue off, but anyway, the lighting down here is terrible. It looks really noticeable maybe in the video, but I guess overall it looks good. It is the next day. This tabletop has dried overnight. So now we're gonna put some polyurethane on here. Just bought this tiny little can here. Clear satin. We don't want it to be glossy. And I got my favorite little sponge brush. Little one and done throwaway things. Supposed to put a thin coat as the first coat. Be nice if I had a bigger brush, but it won't fit into the can. I've never had a lot of good luck using polyurethane. I haven't used it very many times, and the few times I've used it, I have not done a good job. So we're gonna see how this turns out. I've got the first coat of polyurethane on here. According to the can, I gotta let it dry for 3 to 4 hours. I think I've got a couple hours invested in this base. Sanding it down and trying to fill in some nail holes and a bunch of little dings and gouges and stuff. So now we're gonna start putting some primer on here. I'm just using this Kiehl's. I had it left over from another project. I've got this thing sitting up on these boards here with some nails or screws in them. I talked about it in another video. It's gonna be good, so I can paint all the way around this thing and it won't stick to whatever it's sitting on. I've got one coat of primer on here, and now I'm trying to put some caulk on here. This base is gonna be painted black, so I'm trying to clean up where some of these boards meet. You know, that's what it looks like before. And I think that's gonna look better when it's painted black. If it was gonna be stained, then I would just leave it like it was. Kind of have that rough wood look. But I'm really trying to get this thing smooth and so it looks good when it's painted black. It is the next night and I just got home from work. Now we're gonna sand down this top. So you're supposed to use 220 grit sandpaper according to the can. I don't have 220. I've got some 600 and I've got some 120. We're gonna go with 600 because it's just what I got. I'm going to do a very light sanding on this, and then we're going to put another coat of polyurethane on it. I think we're going on 2 weeks on this project. So I've got 3 coats of polyurethane on this, and it's looking really good. It's very smooth. When I first stained it and then I put the first coat of poly on here, it was very rough. So I sanded it down lightly with the 600 grit, and then I put a second coat of poly, sanded it again, third coat of poly, and this thing, it looks good, very smooth. Finally at the point where I can paint this base. So much sanding on this thing, and it still has a lot of imperfections. If I build any more furniture, I'm going to spend the money and buy better quality wood. You know, I wanted this base to be very smooth, almost metal-like. So I tried to fill in a lot of the holes and the nail holes and put some caulk in some of these areas here, and it's so much work. I bought the cheapest 2x2s. That was a huge mistake. I've spent so many hours like filling in holes and dings and then sanding. So much dang sanding. Anyway, so on to the paint. Another thing I screwed up. I mean, okay, what we're looking at here, this is a Valspar cabinet and furniture. It is enamel. So at first I was just going to slap some old latex paint on here, which would be a pretty decent price. But I'm sure this thing being a coffee table, it's going to be kicked. Feet are going to be put all over this thing, and I'm just trying to make it a little more durable. So I went with the cabinet and furniture oil enriched enamel. I was going to get a small thing of it from Lowe's, a quart. I was going to get a quart of it. It was like $23, I think. Of course, they didn't have a quart in the store. And I was like, just give me a gallon. Yeah, this thing was $53, I think. So I'm going to use just a tiny little bit. And now I got to build some more dang furniture or figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of this paint. I should have just said, okay, just give me some of that cheap latex paint over there, because I don't want to spend $53 on a gallon. Yeah, the color we're going with it's black. But you read this thing, it says Noir or Noir. It's black. This paint seems a little thin. It also looks kind of charcoal, but I guess it'll darken up as it dries. And it smells like chemicals, which I'm not used to. I do not use oil-based paint very much. Oil-based paint is a pain to clean up. I pretty much use latex on everything. You can just wash your paintbrush out with water and you're done. I've really only used oil-based on some projects outside, like building some steps or something, and you want to keep the carpenter bees away. It seems like oil-based paint keeps the carpenter bees from drilling holes in your wood. We've got 3 coats of the black paint on this coffee table base. I think it looks good. It probably needs to cure for a couple of days, but we're just trying to keep moving here. So we're going to go ahead and put the top on here. This thing looks pretty good. So I want to screw the top on here, and I've kind of got a problem. This top is kind of curved a little bit. I guess it's the way I glued it together. So my concern is if I clamp this together and screw it together, this is just a 2x2 here. So these 2x6s I think are probably a lot stronger than the 2x2, and I think this curve, even if I flatten it out, it's gonna bow back up, and it's gonna end up pulling this 2x2 up. I went to Lowe's and I picked up this piece of angle iron. This thing was like $17, 1 inch by 1 inch. It's 6 feet long. Also had to buy a new cutting wheel, and I bought some different size screws. I've got my angle iron pieces cut, and I've got all the holes drilled in them. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start working on this. I'm kind of over this project and ready to get it done. So this side's clamped together. The gap looks good. I finally got this top screwed on. Let me try to bring this light in here so you can see what we got going on under here. So you can see the angle iron there, and you can see how I've got all the screws in there. The screws might have been a little bit too big. I don't know. This side over here, same way. Yeah, I think this idea of the angle iron, I think that was a good idea. So I don't have any holes in my wood. So we'll see. I'll tell you what, I'm glad this project's done. There was a lot of things I would have changed about this. I'm certainly no furniture builder. And this thing, honestly, it's a little bit wobbly. So we're gonna see. Somebody's going to end up sitting on this thing probably, and the whole thing's gonna collapse. Another thing I would have done, I don't like this end grain, how it's exposed. So, you know, I didn't follow any plans, but I think these end pieces, I should have had these go all the way to the floor and all the way up. That way you wouldn't see any end grain. Well, this project is a complete failure. I mean, I barely made it upstairs. To put this in the living room, base is completely falling apart. So that's good. Been on this project for 2 weeks, and now I'm gonna have to completely rebuild the base. We've got quite the disaster here. This thing is now completely falling apart as I've taken the top off of it. But we're gonna make some modifications to this. We're gonna go with some screws this time. Now that is very solid right there. So I've got these 2.5-inch screws. I wish I had 3-inch, but I don't. I got a bunch of these. I'm just gonna use these up. I'm gonna put 2 in every single joint. We got 2 in there. And this thing is very solid. I don't know why I didn't do this when I first built this thing, but it is way more solid now. I've got 2 screws in every joint. I do have some cracks in here. Obviously the 2x2s and having 4 screws in the thing, it's a lot. So now I got to go back through. I got to fill in all the holes, and that's what we're going to do now. This base is coming back together pretty quick. We've got all the holes filled in. Hopefully they're going to get dried up quick, and we can sand them down and go ahead and start painting this thing. We finally got this thing all back together. We got it repainted. This paint looks so thick. Probably got about 6 or 7 coats of paint on this thing after having to fix it and repaint it. I'm going to put the top on a little bit different, I think, because I've already got my holes drilled from the first time. I'm going to go ahead and put the angle iron on each side here. I've got the angle iron screwed back on there. We're going to slide the top over here and screw it back on. I had to go ahead and do it this way, different than the first time, just to make sure. I didn't want to drill new holes, so I wanted to put the same angle iron pieces on the correct sides. Well, there she is. We finally got her done. It only took me 3 weeks, and I only had to rebuild it 1 time. So Miss B's already been decorating. Got some knickknacks and some clutter on here. We've been putting our feet on here, been putting drinks and stuff, and it's solid. It's much more stable than it was. We've lived in this house now 3 years. It's nice to finally have a coffee table. And this thing matches the floors good. I had my doubts about this project, especially when the whole table fell apart, but I was able to put it back together, repaint it, and I think it turned out good, so I'm happy with it. I'm happy that the project's done too. I can move on to the next thing. I'm not the greatest craftsman or mechanic, but I don't ever let that stop me. So if you like DIY stuff, that's important. I mean, you're gonna mess things up. I screw things up all the time. You just got to figure it out. You just keep pushing through. You just keep working on it, modify it, repair it, whatever you got to do. Normally I end up with a good looking project. I just take my time and get it figured out. Same thing with working on a car. Not the best mechanic, but I love doing DIY stuff. And in the end, I usually get it figured out pretty good. So if you made it this far in my video, thanks for watching.